Welcome to Becoming Virtuosa, the podcast with Dr. Susan Crockett. You are listening to episode number 2, A Frog in Boiling Water. This episode is dedicated to my late ex-husband, Dale, for the gift of awareness.
Welcome to Becoming Virtuosa, where women learn to love their lives. Do you find yourself frustrated by society's expectations? Looking for practical advice on how to discover your talents and level up your life? You found the right place. Here's your host, U.S. News top doctor, robotic surgeon, and certified life coach, Dr. Susan Crockett.
Hello, my virtuosas, and those of you soon to become virtuosas. I'm your host, Dr. Susan Crockett. I'm happy to be here with you on this beautiful Wednesday day, and so happy that you tuned in. I was doing surgery this morning. I am actually a surgeon. I mentioned in the first podcast the rules about thinking about me, though, on the podcast. I'm Sue. If I'm taking care of you as a doctor, then I'm Dr. Crockett. So anyway, this morning I was doing surgery and I was thinking about the podcast, and in between cases, I was sitting with a friend of mine in the doctor's lounge and we were talking about transformation, and we were talking about transitioning in life from places where we're stuck to places where we get unstuck. And I started telling him a story about how I was in my prior job and how I left that about 6 years ago to start my own minimally invasive GYN surgery practice, which I'm now running. And he made the comment that I was a frog in boiling water. And I thought that was pretty funny. I'd forgotten about the fable. So for those of you that haven't heard it, the fable of the boiling frog is describing a frog being slowly boiled alive, which is pretty gross. But the premise is that if a frog is put suddenly into boiling water, it will jump out. But if it's put in warm water and then the water is slowly brought up to a boil, it won't perceive the danger and it will be cooked to death. So the story is often used as a metaphor to describe the phenomenon that happens when people have an inability or unwillingness to react or to be aware of changes in their circumstances that are threats that arise gradually or get them into a place where they're stuck, rather than when things happen all at once or suddenly. So in other words, we're much more likely to tolerate slow changes, maybe even multiple ones together, until the point we get to where we realize all of a sudden we're sitting in a space that's completely intolerable and that we never would have agreed to when we signed up. So this is the topic for today's podcast. To be aware, this podcast is about developing awareness. In the example of the practice I was in a wonderful medical practice. I was doing general OBGYN and it was awesome. I was really grateful for the job. I was very busy. I loved my patients. I had great colleagues and worked really hard. It was really a blessing, that job. And over the years that I was with that group, I became influenced by robotics. Robotics came along and I got trained, and my heart was just there. And I found the need to change and to stop doing obstetrics and maybe so much of the annual exams and stuff, but that didn't really fit with the ideas of the leadership of the practice. So I found myself in this place that was stuck. Like, I knew I needed to progress and make a change and had kind of hit a glass ceiling, so to speak. So that was my frog in boiling water moment. And we're going to talk a little bit about that on the show today. So my goals for the show overall, for the podcast, are that we learn to manage our brains so that we can live a happier, healthier life with intention and on purpose. And through these podcasts, I'm going to teach you how to build a life of abundance and connection that is aligned with your true self. I want you to have a life that you truly love. So on the first episode, in case you didn't get to hear it, we talked about what a virtuosa is. The short is that it means woman of excellence. It is the feminized version of the word virtuoso, which is to be a great artist or a master of their art or skill. And I've applied this to thinking about our own lives. To become a virtuosa in your own life is the practice of wholeheartedly pursuing your life with your individual gifts and talents to the best of your ability. And it's something like a goal. Like being a virtuosa is not bragging. It's not saying, I am the best, I'm the master, I'm already there. It's kind of the opposite. It's like a fleecing or a visualization or manifestation. It is the ideal to work towards that may never quite be achieved, kind of the concept of infinity. We talked about that. So also in the last podcast, I introduced you to the transformation tool, which is a tool that you can use to help think about your life and your thoughts, to examine your brain and what it's doing. And I gave you a place to go to download it. You can get it free at virtuosacoaching.com/transformation. You can download it to follow along today if you'd like, but you don't have to. You can get plenty out of the podcast without looking at the worksheet. And at the end of the last podcast, I gave you a couple of questions to think about, and I'm hoping you got some time to do that this week. The first one was, what if you were a virtuoso? What if you were the best version of you? What would that be? And the second one was, what do you think your first baby steps towards that would look like? So we're going to follow up on that today and talk about the first step of the transformation tool, which is becoming aware of your current situation or circumstance. So just to review, there are 7 parts of the transformation tool. The first one is the current situation or the circumstance or the problem. That's what we're going to talk about today. Number 2, or the second part, is the desired outcome, or moving closer to the virtuosa outcome. The third part is our current thoughts. And the fourth part are the new thoughts that we want to believe but don't quite. These thoughts usually start with I am and a blank. I am strong, I am healthy, I am capable. Whatever you lay down after I am is what your life will become. That's where your thoughts and your actions and your results will follow. So this is a very powerful part of the tool. In between the current thoughts and new thoughts, we put latter thoughts. Sometimes people call them bridging thoughts. These often are action words that end in ing. They are little baby steps from the current thoughts to the new thoughts that seem unrealistic. So examples would be, I'm becoming, I'm learning, I'm practicing, and I'm doing hard things, or I'm capable of doing hard things. The 6th part of the transformation tool is imagine what you'll be like once the new thoughts are incorporated into yourself. And the trick here is to start thinking those thoughts now and being that person who is, and your life will follow into it. The last part, the 7th part, is what does that look like on a sustained basis? Like, having done that in 5 years, how does your life look different or the same, or what next? So I've got a little exercise for you to do in becoming aware of our current situation or our circumstance. So the purpose of this awareness is not to make anyone feel discontent. Quite the opposite. I want you to start by thinking about your current situation in your life and intentionally think about what is working, what you really love, what is great about your life. Maybe make a gratitude list. That would be a great place to start. And becoming aware of those things helps us look at the things that we don't want to change, or the things that we want to continue to feed intention into in our lives and grow. But the other part of this is becoming aware of the current situations where we may be stuck or want to change. And there are 2 ways you can evaluate this that I'm going to teach you. One is looking at your life in terms of where you may feel stuck, like not have the power to be able to change something, or you need to get unstuck. And examples of this would be being stuck in a relationship that started off one way and has taken a downward spiral to a place that you wouldn't have tolerated when you started the relationship. Maybe being in a job like I was, where you hit a glass ceiling, or just being in a place that's unfulfilling and not aligned with your true north, or you're not aligned with what you know God wants you to do in your life. These are all examples of being stuck and needing to get unstuck. The second way to kind of evaluate places where you might want to change in your life or grow or transform would be to look at where you're buffering. Buffering is like, on your computer where a little dial starts going crazy because it's thinking and it's really not going anywhere. It's just sitting there buffering. Well, buffering in our lives is kind of similar. Buffering is when we use external things to change how we feel emotionally. And it's something we do to keep from fully experiencing our lives, like we're hiding from reality. we're procrastinating, or we're just not showing up. We don't want to face something. And examples of this would be things like overeating, that would be emotional eating. Over exercising could be an example. Over drinking, over utilizing Facebook, or Netflix binging. So what this is not just resting or planning enjoyment or entertainment. It's not just snuggling with your doggy on the couch or wasting time. In order for it to be buffering, it has to have a net negative consequence. So when you are doing things to avoid the emotions or the reality of your life, or the things that you want to be doing or you should be doing, those things are buffering. And if you want to hear more about this, I can recommend an excellent podcast by Brooke Castillo. She does the Life Coach School podcast, and I think it was episode 132 she did a couple of years ago on Stop Buffering. It's a wonderful podcast, and maybe we can put that in the links at the end of the show for you. Okay, so now we're going to do an exercise. I want you to grab a blank sheet of paper, and I want you to put a vertical line down the middle of it so you have two columns. And at the top of the left-hand column, I want you to write stuck. And at the top of the right-hand side one, I want you to write buffering. And then I want you to take about 5 minutes. Don't do this if you're driving, obviously. But if you're not driving, if you're in a place where you can take 5 minutes, I want you to just put the podcast on pause for a minute. And I want you to do a thought download. And I want you to download all the places where you feel stuck in your life or that you're buffering. Just get it all out on paper. Write it all out. And then I want you to turn the piece of paper over, and I want you to actually do that gratitude list if you didn't do it a minute ago. So I want you to have a love list or a gratitude list, and this is going to help ground you as you move forward through the transformation process. Now, if you turned it off and you came back, welcome back. Now, I want you to look at your lists, and I want you to choose one thing to work on off of your stuck or your buffering list. Only one. This requires focus. It's really difficult to try to change 15 things at once. It would just get bogged down and distracted and fall off track. So I want you to choose one thing, and we're going to plug that into the first line of the transformation tool. And this is going to become your first step towards the transformation of yourself regarding this specific circumstance. Yay, you're on your first step. So that's it. What I've shown you today is that first step towards transforming yourself and creating a life of abundance that you truly love. And that first step is awareness and becoming aware of your current circumstances. Now's the time I come to the bonus section of the show that I'd like to do every week, which is what I'm listening to and reading. I think this is a fun part because I love music. Music was my first love, and often I'm influenced by the lyrics and the actual vibration of the instruments and the music that I'm listening to as I'm preparing to talk with y'all. And so for this week, I'm actually going to be just a little self-indulgent with the music. A couple years ago, I co-wrote an album with a friend of mine named Phil Marshall, and we published under the group name The Vergence Project, like Convergence or Divergence. We just called it Vergence Project. And one of the songs on there was written exactly for this episode. I didn't even know it. It's called Diamond in the Rough. And there's a version on YouTube that you can watch that has the lyrics for it. But what that talks about is it's a song for every woman who finds herself in a place where she's working hard and her circumstances are tough and she's a diamond in the rough, literally in the rough. I hope you enjoy listening to that. And then my book choice for this week, I'm always reading like 5 or 6 books at a time, but this week I chose Mark Nepo, The Book of Awakening, Having the Life You Want by Being Present to the Life You Have. And I think this is a really extraordinary book. It's been around for a while, about 20 years. And Mark is actually a cancer survivor. So he has both this amazing way of being poetic and empathetic and just beautiful writing, but he also has it from the perspective of being present because of being on the brink of death. And I started the podcast by dedicating it to my late ex-husband. His name was Dale, and I've had the same experience through him. So Dale was only 52 years old, and he was actually a physician. He was an ER physician. And he passed away very unexpectedly almost 3 years ago from a massive heart attack. Nobody knew he had any trouble. And he left me with 4 beautiful kids, which are amazing. But the other gift of him leaving us that way, which was still is such a difficult thing, was the gift of awareness of the present. Like, I no longer take for granted that I might wake up and be here for my kids tomorrow, or that I can just do whatever I want to do and that I'm invincible. And what it's done is given me a deep, deep gratitude for every day that I live and for the really small things around me. It's given me a sense of presence, and I'm forever grateful for him for that. So that's the book for today. Mark Nepo, The Book of Awakening, helps us become more present in our lives and awaken to what's going on. And that's the theme for today. I hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. Next week, we are going to talk about choosing a desired outcome. Woohoo! So my challenge questions for you this week, I have 2 of them. First of all, I want you to think on this. I want you to dwell on this and meditate on it. What do you love about yourself in your current life? And then the second thing is, what is the one thing you are going to start working on in your own life to grow into the next version of yourself? Okay, my virtuoses. That's all I've got today. To celebrate the launch of the show, though, I'm going to be giving away a pair of Virtuosa wireless earbuds. Each week for the first 4 weeks of our podcast, I'm going to be giving away 1 pair to a lucky listener who subscribes, rates, and reviews the show on Apple Podcasts. It doesn't have to be a 5-star review, although I sure hope you love the show. I want your honest feedback so I can create an awesome show that provides tons of value for you. You can visit virtuosacoaching.com/podcast-launch. That's virtuosacoaching.com/podcast-launch to learn more about the contest and how to enter. You can also take a peek there of a picture of these beautiful AirPods that will encourage you every time you use them that you are on your way to becoming your own virtuosa. I'll be announcing the winners on the show in an upcoming podcast. Okay, my virtuosas, have a wonderful week. Don't be that little frog in the boiling water. Become aware of your surroundings. And I'll see you next week on episode 3. Love always, Sue.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Becoming Virtuosa. If you want to find out more, come check out virtuosacoaching.com. That's virtuosa with an A, coaching.com. See you next week.